Greetings and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Virgo Svamsa. The sage Gemini, from where we get the information about the Svamsa sign, he gives the results of Virgo as like Gemini as well as a small fire. So as a quick review, the Svamsa sign is the most important sign in our chart because it's going to be showing the main challenges we have in life as we're walking down the path we're meant to live. And review the earlier videos of this series where I discuss in detail about the Navamsa sign, the Navamsa chart, which is the 9th divisional chart, and why it's such a critical chart used by Vedic astrologers. And you can think of the Navamsa chart as a whole as the sails on the ship that we're traveling through life. We're traveling on this ocean through life. The Navamsa are the sails, that how well those sails are maintained or how well we can move and coast or direct our life in a way that's meaningful to us. When the sails are tattered or not taut or not used in a correct way, then we drift and we don't have a clear direction of where we want to go, which when we do have a clear direction, we feel more fulfilled. And you can think of the Svamsa sign, the single sign in the chart that this is about, as the main sail, the most important sail. How healthy that sign is in the Navamsa chart is going to determine how well that main directing force, those main challenges are dealt with as you're moving through your life. And it's very easy to find the Svamsa sign. You just find the Atmakaraka planet in your natal chart, which is the planet with the highest degrees in any sign. Find that planet with the highest degrees. Find out what sign that planet falls in the Navamsa chart. I put a graph in the description of this video that you can easily use to find what your Svamsa sign is. So for example, if the moon is the planet that has the highest degrees in your natal chart, that makes the moon your Atmakaraka, your soul planet. And if the moon is in 27 degrees in Taurus, then you look on the left-hand side of this chart and you find Taurus and follow it to the right and find the degree range that it's in. And since it's in 27 degrees, it falls within the final degree range. And if you follow the chart down, that puts your Atmakaraka planet, the moon, in the sign of Virgo in the 9th divisional chart, the Navamsa chart. Since the moon is your Atmakaraka, the Svamsa sign is then Virgo, because it's the sign that the Atmakaraka falls in your Navamsa chart. So this person's Svamsa sign would be Virgo. If you have any questions, you can add them in the comments and I'll answer the questions if you're having trouble to find it. So Gemini is saying that Virgo is like Gemini, and the challenges of a person's life are going to be like Gemini, and that's because Gemini and Virgo are both ruled by Mercury. So we're talking about mercurial problems and mercurial challenges in general. And he includes like a small fire. And we'll go into what that means esoterically and also physically a little bit later on. But let's start with Gemini. Review the Gemini video in this series, but in brief, the two words that Gemini uses are density and stoutness, which are two words that you wouldn't, it's almost counterintuitive when you think about Mercury. When you think of Mercury, you think of agility, you think of a balanced body, an agreeable disposition, someone who's likable, quick on their feet, has a strong mental capacity, a person who, or Mercury in general, as a performer. You don't think of someone who is dense or stout. Dense could mean not intelligent, someone who's dense in their mind. Stout is someone that's not moving quickly, someone that is low to the ground and chubby. The challenge of a Gemini person, it's not just that they're physically dense and stout, it means dense with ideas. Gemini is an air sign. And so these people basically are becoming so inundated with thoughts and so inundated with concepts that they can't separate and sift through them very well. And it results in compacting, in a negative sense, their intellectual world and their mental world. And they're not able to move and change. Remember, Gemini is a mutable sign or a changeable sign, so the ability to upgrade things. It's this hybrid sign where you can start something new but also improve something and do something over the longer term. So a person with a Virgo Svamsa but also Gemini Svamsa, they're dealing with they're dealing with their intellectual world and be able to sift through information in a logical way, but be able to be efficient with the way that they use information, and to not allow their ideas to pile up, which makes them unable to move quickly and unable to adapt very quickly. And so a key is to detach from, a key for Gemini and Virgo people is to detach from ideas and not to see oneself as the same as ideas. The more that we attach ourselves to ideas in and of themselves, the more that we're not able to then change our minds and change our ideas and be able to change our lives, because we become, like, just as an astrological example, someone says, I'm a Leo sun sign. They're attached to that idea that they're a Leo, and that single idea is then they're going to form themselves into that idea because they're attaching themselves to that concept. But when you say, yes, I am a Leo sun sign, but then I'm also these other signs, and these inform my energetic makeup, at the end of the day, if you have an absolute perfect understanding of who you are astrologically, you're still more than that. You're still even more than that. You are not the makeup of your thoughts and your intellectual world. You are a divine soul that is beyond thoughts and beyond thinking. So essentially, a Gemini and a Virgo Svamsa person has to learn how to detach themselves from their intellectual and mental worlds, because if not, they're going to get bogged down and become a slave to their thoughts and become they become so attached to what they think that they're not able to then make meaningful changes in their lives, and their life becomes more difficult. So I mentioned in the Gemini video that there are a lot of famous and well-known people who have Gemini Svamsas, and it goes the same with Virgo. The list is very long of people who are well known by society who have this Svamsa sign, more so than other signs. And that's because Mercury is the planet of talents and highly technical abilities. So when people have a really strong talent and they do something really well, they become well known. And Gemini is it's a planet that makes you, it's the way you present and communicate with the rest of the world. So Mercury's two signs create this kind of worldly attribute to the person. They're able to navigate the world and make their life work in ways that are very materially validated, in a sense. It's not so much of an internal spiritual identity that Mercury builds up. So people with Gemini and also Virgo Svamsas, they become well known because they're really good at a single thing. Also, they tend to be very likable and attractive people that become famous. And so when we're talking about Virgo, one of the separating aspects from the Gemini Svamsa, Virgo is an earth sign, and Mercury is also an earth sign. So this double earth. And what does that mean? It means making things concrete, making things practical and realistic and useful in the day-to-day sense. So the first main thing that a Virgo Svamsa person has is this strong need to manifest their ideas into the real world. It's not enough to just be clear and fluid in your thinking and your conceptual understanding of life. That needs to become practical. And that's another reason why there's so many famous people with Virgo Svamsas, because they have one thing that they're really good at, and they make that one good thing that they're good at real and useful to other people, but they are able to manifest with greater clarity what they're good at. And so a person with a Virgo Svamsa that can come to mind is Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a multi-talented person, an inventor, a highly intellectual person. But he wasn't just a theoretician or a philosopher. He made his ideas into real-world inventions. And he was known for his adages, his different sayings that he came up with that are just ways to live life in the practical manner. Like, an apple a day keeps the doctor away is one that just comes to my mind. Benjamin Franklin is a good example of someone who had made ideas useful to other people. And I'm going to go through a few different quotes from other Virgo Svamsa people that I think really articulate what Virgo Svamsa is about. And one of them is Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was an important French painter in the late 1800s who influenced Picasso, and his form of painting was very, very influential. He's a post-impressionistic painter. And one thing, he said a few different things that really articulate what I'm trying to get at when it comes to the practicalities and manifesting things. And one thing he said was, all theories mess you up inside. And that is essentially saying that when you're working through theories, you become so entangled and dense with them that they screw you up. And so he has a Virgo Svamsa, but again, as you can see, he's got a Gemini problem, or he's aware of that Gemini problem, of all of the theories that end up screwing with the way you think about the world. The theories will just mess you up. He became so well known because he sought perfection in his work, and he was able to manifest beyond just being a thinker. So he became very well known because he made things concrete. And another quote he said is, "The artist makes things concrete and gives them individuality." So he understood that you need to make something real in order for it to be art, or for it to be valuable, or for it to not continue to mess you up inside. So naturally, he understood what making things concrete was all about, and how that really determines your capacity for success, and you're able to be fulfilled in life. One very important concept that making things concrete, and about Virgo in general, it's this idea of perfection. And Virgo Svamsa people are going to be going through this throughout their life, wanting things to be perfect. And Virgos have that reputation as this perfectionist kind of mentality, mechanical, in the sense that they want things to be yes and no. It's a very mathematical sign. It's a very scientific sign, because you're aiming at getting at the exact truth of something. And so Virgo is the sign of perfection, and one symbol that the Vedic tradition uses is Virgo's environment is the top of a mountain, because the top of a mountain, it's where the air is the most pure. It's the peak of something. It's where something at that very peak, it's at its absolute apex, and what that represents is purity. And you can think of if you have a Virgo Svamsa, this need for perfection is always going to be nagging at you, and that desire for something to be as pure as possible. And not achieving that perfection, or what drives that perfection, is the small fire, which is what I was describing, that Gemini says, it's like Gemini, but a small fire. So that small fire, that push to make something perfect, to purify something, is a very Virgo trait. And which was somewhat uncanny, last Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States, and Martin Luther King Jr. had a Virgo Svamsa, and uncanny because the day before he was assassinated, he gave a speech, and that speech was famous. It's called the Mountaintop speech, and it was about, we are going to get to the top of the mountain, we're going to get to the mountaintop, and I might not get there with you, but one day we'll get there. And then he was assassinated the next day. But it's uncanny because that mountaintop for him was a symbol of racial equality, or living in a society that treated people in a more just way. And that was the mountaintop for him. That was this ideal. That was his vision, his perfection. And he might not get there, but one day we're going to get to that mountaintop. And so there you have a very Virgo desire that he had, a fire to perfect his mission in life, which was his search for racial equality in the United States and worldwide. So he gave a very Virgo dream that he had, that mountaintop speech. And that's what the Virgo Svamsa wants. It's seeing something that can be obtained in the life's journey of getting to that top, that perfection. And that perfection is very difficult. And it's partially what makes Virgo Svamsa people, what makes them so well known. Another is Novak Djokavic, the tennis player. He has won the most major championships of all tennis players of all time. And he is known for his fiery temper. And he became the best tennis player of all time because of his intensity to strive to become absolutely the best and perfect, most pure tennis player. And he's known for his perfection of all elements of the game of tennis. But you can see as he plays, he has a strong, he doesn't play poised. He plays poised. You have to be poised to play tennis, but he plays with this this intensity of purity. Even when he's dominating a match, you can see he's still not upset. He's still upset with his play, and he's not at a perfect level. It makes him upset. It makes him agitated. You can see it on the court. Even when like I said, he's up 2 sets to nothing, 5 games. You know, he's a very fiery personality. And again, with Paul Cezanne, the painter, he gives a good quote that says, "My age and health will never allow me to realize the dream of art I've been pursuing all my life." So he said another quote where it doesn't matter if he lived 1,000 years, he would never get to the perfection that he wanted. And this is a painter that inspired generations of painters after him. He was one of the best of all time in terms of painting, and he was never satisfied. He couldn't reach the mountaintop of perfection that he wanted. And very interestingly enough, one of Paul Cézanne's favorite things to paint was called Mont sans Victoire, which was a mountain range near where he lived. And it's interesting because one of his favorite subjects was to paint mountains and the specific mountain he lived near. So it goes perfectly into the Virgo theme of seeking perfection. And when he painted them from a distance. And he had this great admiration for nature and the beauty and perfection of nature. And that came through with his depictions of this mountain. And he said, I could paint for 100 years, 1,000 years without stopping, and I would still feel as if I knew nothing. So a person with kind of the purity of thought of that he doesn't know anything, and it gives a clarity that I don't know anything, and that allows me to then work and manifest in the world because I'm not attaching myself to certain things. I know this or I know that. So he rose to high levels in his painting because he never isolated himself to just knowing or doing one thing, or he didn't chain himself down to ideas and thoughts, but at the same time had that striving for perfection. Another painter, Paul Gaugin, who also has a Virgo Svamsa, he was known for going to Polynesia and going to Tahiti and painting the women and the culture there. So here you have another person with a Virgo Svamsa seeking perfection, seeking purity. And when he went to Tahiti, he was escaping from Paris, from the French society, and he wanted to live in a place like an Eden-like lifestyle where he could live a less complicated, more pure life. And he said, I have come to an unalterable decision to go and live forever in Polynesia. Then I can end my days in peace and freedom without thoughts of tomorrow and this eternal struggle against idiots. So he was a very famous painter. He was known for being a partner with Vincent van Gogh. But he saw it, and what he became famous for was his paintings of this idyllic, pure lifestyle in the tropical paradise of Tahiti. So you have, again, this Virgo theme of seeking purity, seeking perfection. And he showed that through physically going to a place of purity. He didn't actually find this paradise that he was looking for. He found a different type of society. He depicted that there was problems with drugs, and there was other societal problems in Tahiti, but compared to Paris, he saw it as a much more pure place, the mountains and the rivers and the islands of Tahiti. So you have another example of a person with that drive to be a great painter, to do something very well, but he wanted to do it in a way that reflected this inner perfection that he saw in Tahiti. And so Virgo, it's a very problem-solving sign. And people with Virgo Svamsas are going to have part of what that fire inside of the small fire, as Gemini says, part of that fire is to have it's to solve problems, because it's called a tamasic sign, and tamasic is the problem-solving part of our consciousness. So when we see a problem, we want to improve that problem and then move on to the next problem. We can't always be in a problem-solving state of mind. So a challenge for Virgo Svamsa people is always having this sense that I've got to fix or improve something. I've got to make something better. And it's constantly looking for problems and looking for areas to improve. And what that causes is a mentality that weighs a person down, and it actually it's what ulcers come from. So when Jamie says a small fire, he's physically talking about digestive issues. And those digestive issues come from the constant need to purify, like the mentality of saying, I got to improve this, I got to improve this. What that does is causes a very stressful mindset, and always having this need to nothing is good enough in the material sense. So the small fire of Virgo also means digestive problems and ulcers. And that comes from this problem-solving mentality that these people can become too inundated with. So Virgo Svamsa people are going to want to pay attention to how much they're thinking too much about problems and trying to fix problems and seeing problems where there might not be problems. And they can be very mathematical and practical, but again, you don't want to overdo it and to then cause having too much fire, essentially. And what that does is causes your body become too acidic. And becoming too acidic, it's a lack of quiet and a lack of relaxation. You need that balance and not always thinking about earthly, practical, material problems and obstacles all the time. So partially what we can see, which informs a lot about Virgo, and all of the Svamsas, is what planet is debilitated and exalted in that sign, and we're going to see more of the challenges. We already talked about Mercury. Mercury is exalted in Virgo. Venus is debilitated in Virgo. And that is because Venus is the planet of relaxation. It's the planet of doing things the easy way. It's the planet where we make deals with people. It's this kind of diplomacy and working with other people in order to bring good things in our lives. And it doesn't do good in Virgo because Virgo is so much about honing in on really specific small things and dealing with them, whereas Venus wants to float on the waters of life and rejuvenate oneself. Virgo is too much of a need for perfection, too much of a detail-orientated area of life, where Venus has the ability to intuit things and to feel through things. Virgo is so much detail-orientated and logical thinking. Venus wants to just flow with life and allow information to come and be able to see in between the lines of how things work. So a person who their Svamsa is not doing well, or they can notice that they're having problems in their life, is when they notice that they're not able to relax, they're not able to go with the flow, they're not able to stop thinking about problems. They find themselves in situations where they feel they're doing too much work and other people that they're dealing with are doing less work. So there's not an equal exchange between people. And a person who just feels like they can't get away from their to-do list. This is one sign of a poor Virgo situation in life. Like I said, unable to relax. And a big part of it is relationship issues for a Virgo Svamsa person. How are your relationships doing in life? A Virgo Svamsa person is going to have this lifelong challenge of dealing with so we're all dealing with relationships are a huge part of life in general. For a Virgo Svamsa person, they'll be heightened, but in very specific ways. So another person with a very good example who gave quotes about Virgo Svamsa, or the challenges of a Virgo Svamsa, is Faye Dunaway, the actress who won the Academy Award for her portrayal in the movie called Network. Faye Dunaway, one of the top actresses of her time, but an extremely talented actress that reached the top of her career. She has a Virgo Svamsa, and she, in her character in the Network movie, she describes her relationship life as cold. She's so much more focused on her career and her ability to navigate the corporate world. She was a problem solver. She was a producer. She was able to manifest her ideas. And in the movie, and when I first saw her in the movie and she was talking about her sex life and she's just kind of detached sexually, you could sense that that was something about her personally as well. But in the movie, she's such a Virgo Svamsa person, but I believe in her real life, she was like that. And that was that cold kind of detachment when it came to relationships and her sexual life. And she has a couple quotes where she says, sex is emotional, it's connection, it's intimate, it's looking into somebody's soul, it's naked in every sense of the word. It's the hardest thing in the world. So she was a person who had, as you could see from this quote, she had problems with relationships. She had several marriages, and it was just an area of difficulty to understand. She was such a more practical and real world thinking kind of person and logical that dealing in relationships was always a source of, she just kind of felt like a fish out of water in a certain sense. She didn't have those practical relationship skills, which is a common Virgo situation. And she said, it's awfully hard to make marriage work. I've tried twice and I don't know how. To have to think of somebody else so much of the time, it's such a compromise. So you can see this Virgo mentality of, I just can't make relationships work. I just don't understand how they function. I'm compromising. I'm not actually I'm not establishing a win-win situation with another person. I give them something they don't have, they give me something I don't have, and we can make it work out. That's a complementary relationship. So people with a Virgo Svamsa are going to have this kind of difficulty in establishing this kind of Venusian equal exchange with another person. And that can come from undervaluing oneself, not having a positive self-esteem, and not having a self-worth that is healthy. And therefore you put yourself into situations that validate that low self-worth, and you end up in kind of destructive or turbulent marriages and turbulent relationships with people. As I said, Virgo Svamsa people can be very uninterested in sex or be very cold sexually. And that is because Virgo, as I said, is such a problem-solving sign. It's about, it's so much less about fantasy and about making things work on an intuitive level. It's so much of an earthy practicality thing. And so Virgo is, in Vedic astrology, it's the girl, it's not a virgin. And the difference is that a virgin is a woman of age to bear children, whereas a girl is a prepubescent girl, where there's no interest in sex whatsoever. It's actually the sign that produces the least amount of sexual drive. But that doesn't mean that Virgo Svamsa people are going to be cold sexually all the time. You have the opposite end of the spectrum. Well, first, Andy Warhol, person with a Virgo Svamsa. Talk about cold and detached. Someone with a Virgo Svamsa who he was gay, but he didn't have many relationships in his adult life, and he just wasn't known. He just didn't. Lifelong partners were not a big deal to him. It's not something that he was known for being, and he had that cold demeanor to begin with, and he was not known as a sexually passionate person at all. But you think of Andy Warhol, you think of someone who manifested his ideas and became one of the most well-known artists of the 20th century. And Andy Warhol, he was also known for establishing very unequal relationships with people. He didn't, when he had his factory, he would take so much from the people that were there. He was inspired and he would be taking so many ideas, but he didn't give them back much. And so he was highly criticized later in his life that he allowed a lot of the people around in his circle to fall into these terrible life situations, material situations, while he was thriving, because the give and take with them was very poor. He didn't understand about making interpersonal relationships mutually beneficial. And he was called Drella, Dracula and Cinderella. Dracula in the sense that he was draining people, not of their literal blood, but draining people of their energy. And that is a very unequal kind of relationship to the benefit of him, but he became known as a Dracula, an energy-sucking person. And so he was not known for his ability to make relationships. He was very well known for his business ability, which is a talent of Mercury. But he had a very successful Svamsa, or a successful life, and he was able to create very good business contacts and had a good mind for economics. So some other people, as I was getting into, with relationship issues on the other end of the spectrum would be Sean Connery, Marlon Brando, and Rasputin. These individuals were highly sexually charged people. And they had tons of relationships. Sean Connery, known as the James Bond, the playboy of the 70s, and he was a very I don't know much about Sean Connery, but he was known for his promiscuity, we'll say. Marlon Brando, on the same side of that, known for his promiscuity. And in his autobiography, I don't know, he had 3 or 4 marriages, I think 10 kids, but he was known as, in his autobiography, the one thing he refused to talk about were his relationships and his marriages. And that shows you he had so little understanding of how to make a marriage, a mutual partnership work. He just expressed his sexuality as free as you could possibly think. And so that's the other end of a Virgo Svamsa, where a person is cold and mechanical with sex, or just doesn't know how to give that equal exchange of energy between people. On the other end, where they're so passionate and they're like a taker of energy, and they're always wanting to be sexually promiscuous, that comes from also a lack of understanding of how sexuality and how relationships, the Venusian part of us, works. They're on the taking end, and they're not making long-term stable partnerships. And so that comes from the other end of having so many sexual partners. It's still based in the same lack of understanding of the equal exchange that Venus gives us. And Rasputin, the mystic who became in Russia, you can look into who he was, but he was a very, very promiscuous and sexually magnetic individual who, again, kind of had that vampiric energy to him, where he just wanted to have sex with everybody, and he thought you could purify yourself through sex, and by indulging. Not understanding Venus comes, you also indulge too much in your life. You indulge in the good things in life, the things that make you feel intense pleasure. So Rasputin was the indulgence par excellence, because he thought that you could actually become pure through indulgence. And that's a whole philosophical system, but look into Rasputin. He was another Virgo Svamsa as well. And so you have this indulgence aspect of, if your Virgo Svamsa is harmed in a certain way, you're going to be an indulgent person. And an imbalance, when you indulge, you feel really good and you feel really terrible later on. You're going to have to find a balance in there. And so that is another aspect of seeing if your Virgo Svamsa is healthy or not. How healthy is your Venusian side of your life? And how well are you able to create win-win situations with other people based on a healthy sense of self-worth? And so finally, the other aspect of what I wanted to talk about with Virgo is it kind of plays into that density idea and the stoutness. So there's a purification. We've been talking about purity and wanting beautiful things. And again, quick thought, Marlon Brando, he went to Tahiti just like Paul Gauguin, looking for purity and perfection, a place far away from the problems of life. He wanted to get to a place that had a lot of purity attached to it, which would, for him, just like Paul Gauguin, Tahiti. And so the last part, and it has to do with the digestive issues and the small fire portion of the Virgo Svamsa. Becoming emotionally distraught, having a very sense of frustration of not getting not manifesting something that you want to manifest. These are that when you're unable to manifest something, when you're unable to clear your thoughts and make things concrete in your life, it creates, just like Gemini, a bigness. It makes when you're crowded mentally, you end up taking on that energy in your physical form as well. Just like just like Orson Welles, as I spoke about with the Gemini Svamsa, Marlon Brando was known for he got really big as he got older. He was the sex symbol as he was young. He became overweight, and he was a very intellectual person, but he kind of gave up in his later years, and he became very indulgent, and it turned into having a big body. And Marlon Brando was known as the top actor of his age, and all of the top actors nowadays point to him as the best of all time. And again, Virgo Svamsa influences a person to become extremely, extremely good at something. Another example is Elvis, the king of pop, a guy who worked so much. Virgo Svamsa is all about hard work in the material sense. Elvis was known for his work ethic. And again, he became big in his later life. He indulged. He had an addiction problem with painkillers. And he was so mentally broken towards the end of his life. And you feel for him too. There's something about him that what fascinated me was he lost a twin when he was born. His twin didn't survive. And that always tormented him throughout his life. And he became so famous, and he became so, he was such a hard worker, and he dominated the world of music. But again, later in his life, he indulged too much. He wasn't able, he stopped manifest. He had this incredible ability to manifest his ability to work hard and to become so well known and famous. But it got the best of him, and he was overindulging, and he died of a drug overdose, I believe. And he was taking a lot of pills and a lot of drugs in his later life, which is sad. And again, that points to the overindulgent aspect of Venus being debilitated in Virgo. So Virgo Svamsa needs to really work on that small fire in the sense of being really passionate about doing something, not being overly passionate about being perfect, and allow your body and your mindset to become too acidic, and which leads to frustration and health problems, specifically digestive problems and ulcers. And also working on establishing equal fair trade relationships, relationships where both parties are gaining and it's not unequal or unbalanced on one side or the other. So having a interpersonal and business relationships that are healthy and equal for both, and not overindulging and not being not wanting so much pleasure and not expecting pain, because on the other side of that pleasure comes the emptiness and that lack of self-rejuvenation and that feeling of burning through your vital energy and burning through your Venus, burning through your ability to, your life force itself, which Venus represents. So hopefully that can give you a better idea of what the major themes and of the challenges of Virgo Svamsa are in the chart. Like Gemini, so dealing with a lot of the intellectual world with that small fire, that passion to get something just right and just perfect, and being able to find an equilibrium in yourself to accept that even if you don't get somewhere perfect, the pursuit of perfection is what's important. And that's a quote from Faye Dunaway. It's that pursuit of wanting something to be perfect is the words that she used, which is more important than the actual part of perfection. So those are the themes of Virgo Svamsa. Next, we're going to be talking about Libra Svamsa sign, one of Venus's signs for that Svamsa. So stay tuned for Libra Svamsa.